Joining me now, Aaron Cox, one of the Baltimore Sun reporters who broke the story. Welcome to you, and also welcome to attorney and former prosecutor Philip Snyder. So, Aaron, let's start with you and your paper's reporting, because this attorney general, let's just step one here. Why was he at this party full of teenagers in the first place?
Well, this was a beach house that he and a number of other parents from his son's high school rented for about a week. And he says that he stopped by late that night to tell his son what time they planned to leave Delaware in the morning to drive to a college event elsewhere.
And so in reading your piece in The Sun, I mean, these kids call this, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the eviction party, meaning they were planning on throwing down.
Yeah, one of the kids that I talked to said it was called the eviction party because they were trying to see how far they could go before they could get evicted. A lot of teenagers posted a lot of pictures, a lot of video, a lot of different evidence of what that party was like. There was loud dance music, there was fluids being poured from the balcony onto dancers below, there were lots of dancing, grinding on the bar, dancing on the table, and there was just so much posted online, both tweets, videos, pictures, that it seemed like a pretty big party that went on for a pretty long time.
Pretty big party, and fortunately or not, this photo was snapped of him smack dab in the middle of it. Aaron, I'm going to come back to you because, Philip, we have to talk about the law. Because if an adult sees underage drinking, by law, what is he or she required to do?
Well, first off, every state is different, but I want to say this looked like a Miley Cyrus party. I can't believe this attorney general is actually saying, I don't know, there could have been Kool-Aid in the cups. And what disturbs me so much is that his moral compass is all the way to the left at empty. He does a PSA saying, I'm supporting these harsher drinking laws for juveniles, for people under the age of 18, and he goes to this party that's clearly serving hard alcohol and beer, and he does nothing.
I mean, do you think, I think back to my parents, and I feel like if my parents were looking at some red cups, they'd be looking very closely at them. I mean, is this the kind of thing, do you think that he should have stopped and taken a look to see what these kids were drinking?
Absolutely. He's the highest law enforcement official in the state. And what does he do? He somewhat sanctions and authorizes this party. He comes in, he closes his ears, he closes his eyes and says, look, I'm going to enforce it on everyone else, but I'm not going to enforce it on my own son. And I think when he runs for governor, which he's planning on doing in the upcoming election, this is going to be a huge point of contention in that campaign.
Aaron, let's be fair. Your paper, you talked to Gansler for more than an hour on the story. What is his defense, and does he believe this will impact his gubernatorial campaign? He wants to be governor.
Right. Well, his defense today is slightly different than his defense when we spoke for about 2 hours earlier this week. His initial defense was that he couldn't remember whether or not there was any drinking. And keep in mind, this is somebody who was part of a group of parents that organized this event. There were rules that the parents set out for the kids. It said no driving, no hard alcohol, but it didn't mention beer. And Gansler volunteered to us that he was one of the parents who explained what those rules were to the kids, and also that, drinking a beer wasn't an offense that was going to get one of these kids sent home. So, I mean, his defense initially was that it's his job to parent his own kids, and it's not his responsibility to be the police. And multiple times he offered various different hypothetical scenarios where he didn't think he would have to act. One is if he's at a tailgate party, for example, and he sees a bunch of people who look underage drinking, is it his job as Attorney General to go and investigate? He also posed the hypothetical of if he was walking down the street and he saw kids from Landon School, which is the school in Bethesda where his son attends, if he saw them with beers in their hands, is it his responsibility to stop them? And when he talked to us earlier this week, he said no. Now, today, after the picture was all over the internet, all over the media, and people were pretty outraged at that statement, he took a little bit of a different tack today at his press conference. He talked about how he does have a moral responsibility for all children, and that, in hindsight, he should have known there was drinking, or he should have investigated and should have done something differently. He also made an appeal to parents to say, that a lot of parents would feel like they might be in a difficult situation if they walked into something like this, and it's a judgment call that every parent has to make.
Like we said, he's running for governor. We'll see if this one single picture changes that at all. Erin Cox,